Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the DFS Report. We have an absolutely riveting two-game slate for you this evening. It's an absolutely gorgeous day here in southwestern Ontario. There's no place I'd rather be than right here in my basement office talking about this two-game slate. Zach, I'm sure you're just as enthralled with this slate as I am.
Yeah, sure is a slate of National Hockey League games, that's for sure.
There are going to be 4 hockey teams playing. I mean, to be honest, the first game is going to be awesome. These two teams just met 2 weeks ago, right after the trade deadline, and it was 7-4. A couple empty netters, I believe, in that one. But that should be a great hockey game. I'm not going to lie. But from a DFS standpoint, this slate is horrific. I will certainly be tuning in for Toronto, Colorado. I might have something else to do during Minnesota, Seattle. That does not feel great. It has been a bit of a struggle bus for us these first couple nights of the week. So hopefully, maybe we can just absolutely nail this 2-game slate. There's a lot of things to do. Tom makes a great point. Got to look on the bright side. This is a way better slate than Friday's slate, which that's a 1-gamer. So it could be worse, I suppose. 2 games ready to bump and grind. Maybe Kraken win their first game on the second of a back-to-back. It's potential. I actually don't mind the Kraken a little bit tonight. Oilers gave Zach a red light tan. Oh, I like that. The Rangers sucked ass last night. That also was true. Bet365 has an offer, $10 free bets for every Leaf goal. How do we feel about that? You might get $10. I don't know. Like, they could. We'll get into it. Let's break it down. We've got Joseph Woll starting for the Toronto Maple Leafs. We've got Mackenzie Blackwood for the Avs. This is Philip Gustafson for the Wild. Projected to see Philip Grubauer in the second half of back-to-back in Minnesota, Battle of the Phillips in that one. Let's start with the top game here. The first game, we got Toronto and Colorado. Colorado minus 127 now. They were about minus 115 this morning. So a bit of a drift out. I'm assuming a little bit of that has to do with Joseph Woll getting the start. 3.1 implied total for the Avs, 2.8 implied total for the Leafs, who are plus 115 home underdogs. You don't see the Leafs as home underdogs very often, but they are certainly that this evening. Matchup scores in this game pretty bleak for the Toronto Maple Leafs. The Tavares line has a slightly better matchup than the Matthews line. On the other side of the ice, pretty bleak matchups for that top 6 as well. Colorado 1 has a slightly better matchup as they'll go head-to-head with the Matthews line. Obviously, I don't think this is any surprise to anybody. This is the higher event of the 2 games this evening. The Matthews line continues to be really, really solid. Obviously, he had a massive game over the weekend. Or not over the weekend. That was on Monday. So he's been better since the Four Nations break. He has still not been quite his dominant self, but he's putting up points on a pretty fairly regular basis. On the Colorado side, it continues to just be that top line being insanely good, ridiculous. Again, their expected goals for is under 5 now, but 4.6 is still probably the best mark in the entire league. Not getting really anything going here from Brock Nelson, Valerie Nichushkin, and Casey Middlestat, or not Casey, Jonathan Drouin, pardon me. It's actually somehow been worse than the Casey Middlestat line is what I was trying to get to, which, Zach, we've talked about it. Like, we were excited to see this. Like, me more than you, really liked Brock Nelson and played him quite frequently when he was with the Islanders. Then moving over now to Valerie Nichushkin's line, we thought this was going to work beautifully, and it really hasn't. So this sample here is a little bit of still the sample from Casey Middlestat. So a lot of Jonathan Drouin and Valerie Nichushkin playing with Middlestat, and then a little bit of this line together. It's in fact been quite a bit worse. The sample of just this entire trio. It's about 39.5 minutes. Oh boy. 1.14 expected goals for per 60. Still 28.9 scoring chances for, but just 1.5 high danger chances for. That means they've generated 3/4 of a high danger look it together in 40 minutes of play. So it's been really, really bad. I think that I'll feel comfortable still playing Nichushkin one-offs or Nichushkin with Colorado 1 for some power play correlation. But full stacking Colorado 2 feels like a tough proposition right now. Colorado 3 has the better matchup of the group here, of the top 9, and they've got better offensive metrics than the Nichushkin Brock Nelson line. So if I'm trying to get a little bit different off that Colorado 1 chalk, I think Colorado 3 would be a bit of a interesting route to go. Not a lot of offense on that line. The underlying metrics have been solid. Maybe a Charlie McAvoy, Casey Charlie Coyle, Jesus, I'm struggling. Charlie Coyle, Ross Colton mini stack could be in play there. Maybe it's just a Ross Colton one-off, something like that. But obviously, Colorado 1 is the best play on this slate. They have been for basically every game they've played since the Netchas trade. And they're 20,700, which is actually extremely affordable. McKinnon up at 9K, Matthews at 8,800. They're going to be the two highest owned forwards on the slate. So, Zach, let's start on the Avs side of things here. Like, given how poor that second line is, you are kind of boxed into playing that top line or just focusing on the power plays. And the power play is in a really good spot tonight. We know that Maple Leafs penalty kill has really struggled since the Four Nations face-off. They have killed, I think, just 71% of their penalties since the Four Nations face-off. They are ranked 26th over their last 10 games. And the Avs power play is really heated up here. Number one power play advantage on the night. Similarly, though, the Avs penalty kill hasn't been great, a little bit better than Toronto's, but then Toronto's power play has been scorching hot, and they just nuked the slate on Monday. So this game is super interesting in the fact that it's going to come down to probably both power play units in this game. What are your thoughts? Let's start with Colorado.
Yeah, I mean, this seems like a spot you got to get to the Avs, obviously. Small 2-game slate like this, I really like the idea of getting down in this third line here. Again, we really want that Colorado 2 line to work, but man, it has just been so bleak there offensively. The interesting thing about this third line for me is kind of the production that both Charlie Coyle and Ross Colton have had against the Leafs in their careers. Ross Colton, 10 games played against Toronto, 4 goals and 8 points in those games. Charlie Coyle, meanwhile, 4 goals and 21 points in 29 games played. That's the second highest point per game mark against any team for Charlie Coyle. The only team he's had a higher point per game against is actually the Montreal Canadiens. So I don't mind the idea of getting down here to this third line. They're going to be pretty inexpensive to get to, $6,400 for a mini stack of Coyle and Colton. Ross Colton, 8.3 shots on goal per hour over his last 20 games, 1.4 individual expected goals, shooting just 6%. So he's a guy who's probably due for some goals to kind of come his way here. The line stats are pretty solid for these guys. They do have the best matchup again. I think the big issue here is that they're only going to see about 22% of the 5-on-5 ice time here for the Colorado Avalanche. So you're going to have to hope that, they're going to find a way onto the scoreboard somehow. It kind of goes without saying if you're going to be playing them. But I don't mind this option of getting down there at all. Obviously, Colorado's top line, that's one to build around here for sure. And I like the idea of building around the power play as well. You can kind of get funky and get a little exposure to that Colorado 2 line that way through Valeri Nichushkin or even Jonathan Drouin, who at $3,800 I don't think is the worst play either. Over his last 20 games played, 2.9 points per hour. There's absolutely no shot volume to speak of for Drouin here as of late, just 4.1 shots on goal per hour. But you know what? He's finding ways to put up some assists, score a couple of goals here and there, and go from there.
Yeah, like the one issue with Colorado 3 is obviously the lack of shot volume. Ross Colton's okay. Charlie Coyle, he got 4 shots in 5 games since joining the Avs. So yeah, not a lot of shot volume to go around whatsoever. But Ross Colton does have 2 goals, 7 assists, 9 points in his last 9 games. Been on a bit of a nice run. I think that like the lack of shot volume is the obvious concern. But when you look at the rest of this slate, like basically the entire Minnesota Wild and the entire Seattle Kraken, for the most part, there's a lack of shot volume across the board for both of those teams. And then if you look basically outside of the Maple Leafs top 6, there's no shot volume really to speak of in their bottom 6 either. So like on this slate specifically, Colorado 3 feels kind of even better than maybe they normally would, because it's not like there's a bunch of other super cheap options with really good shot volume that you're kind of passing up on. So I think that they're interesting just given how, they have some of the best underlying metrics on the slate. And then obviously the matchup is fairly decent for them. Javier wants to know, is there a good D to pair with Coyle and Colton? Just looking at their last game really quickly here, they spent most of their ice time with Lindgren, Malinsky, Girard, and Johnson. So I would say that probably Sam Girard would be the best guy to do so. Obviously, they got some 5v5 correlation, and then what limited power play time Ross Colton is going to see, it's going to be coming with Samuel Girard. So that would probably be the guy to go to. Just makes that stack even cheaper. But yeah, like I don't think I'm not overly concerned on, correlating with Colorado 3 all that much. I'm using him as a salary relief so I can jam in, maybe a Cale Makar and get a little different with my Makar builds or something like that. Like, I don't even think playing Colorado 3 with Colorado 1 is all that outrageous tonight. Like, I think given how this slate is, Colorado scores 5 goals tonight, an onslaught of the Avs could be optimal given kind of what the second game looks like too. So we take a look at the team trends as of late. The Maple Leafs really, really struggling offensively at 5v5, just 2.11 expected goals for per 60 as of late, which is kind of what got us off of them on Monday. But the power play has just been scorching hot. So they kind of offset some of their struggles offensively at 5v5 with that power play right now. But defensively, they haven't been all that great either. 2.7 expected goals against per 60 isn't a terrible mark, but it's not very good, and it is the worst mark on the entire slate tonight. They also have the worst penalty kill on the slate tonight. So I really, really like the Avs tonight. I bet them on the money line this morning. I'm kind of all in on the Avs and finding different ways to build around them and just hoping that they can pull out a big win here, and then the other game is pretty low scoring. So any thoughts here on what you want to do with Toronto, given the fact that this offense has struggled, but is it mostly just going to be kind of the same old thing where it's just power play builds with Toronto, because that's really the only safe route to go, it feels. Luckily, Nyes, Matthews, and Marner fully correlate in the top power play unit. So like you can kind of just play Toronto 1 by default, and whatever they do at 5v5 is fine. And then the power play is obviously great. Tom says, I love that DK Price, Nate, and AM34, so that anyone and everyone can play them together tonight. And yeah, that's going to be a very popular build tonight, having both of them just kind of jammed in with Gustafsson and net, and then running back with as many values as you can possibly find. Is that a build that interests you? Are you more interested in full stacking the Leafs in some capacity?
Yeah, I mean, I think trying to get around the power play is the way to go here. They make it pretty simple for you here for Toronto right now with, no defenseman or anything like that. Full correlation on that top line. The second line, obviously, Tavares and Nylander out there as well. So, yeah, I think it's just going to be trying to find ways to kind of get a little bit different here through these builds. Maybe it's something like John Tavares, William Nylander, Matthew Nyes mini stack, and just hope that Austin Matthews doesn't go bonkers or anything like that here tonight, because he's projected for a shitload of ownership, 42%. So there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be kind of jamming in these Matthews, McKinnon sort of builds into their lineup. So obviously it comes with massive risk on a small 2-game slate like this, but I don't hate the idea of trying to find ways to get different. I actually like the Toronto Maple Leafs on the money line here tonight, plus 115. I actually bet them this morning here. And one thing
of us
that
is going to be sad.
Yeah, one of us is. One thing I kind of did, and we'll see it in the DFO head-to-head a little bit later, is I actually have Nathan McKinnon and Ross Colton in my lineup with Joseph Woll as the goaltender. It's going to be a really different build. There's obviously some risk there with, 2 guys going up against the goaltender here. But, the build that I kind of said to myself in doing that was, maybe McKinnon gets a goal and some solid shot volume. Ross Colton gets some shots away as a lower owned guy as well. And the Leafs are able to walk away with a win. That's kind of the way that I built that lineup. So you have to kind of be comfortable getting a little bit different here. I mean, shit, Brock, yesterday there was a 9-game slate and somebody was sharing in the Discord that the guy that took down the person that took down the $27 single entry yesterday had an Oilers onslaught going up against Karel Vejmelka, and it was enough to take down the contest. So don't be worried about getting a little bit different here on a slate like this tonight for sure.
That's outrageous. Yeah, like didn't even play Mrazek or didn't play Spencer Knight. Just was like, yeah, let's go for Melka and this onslaught. That makes no sense, but whatever, to each their own. Just speaking about AM34 and McKinnon here, obviously, I think when you take a look at the ownership, flooding in on Jared Spurgeon, flooding in on Ryan Hartman, and that is not the right tab, and flooding in on Philip Gustafsson, I think you're going to see a lot of builds that include basically a start at McKinnon, Matthews, Hartman, Spurgeon, Gustafsson. Like, I think that's going to be a starting point for a lot of builds. The Spurgeon and Hartman don't have great power play correlation, but they have good 5v5 correlation. So I think that'll be pretty popular tonight when you just take a look at the ownership. And if that's kind of the route that you were planning on going, like in cash games, I think that's obviously fine. But in GPPs, I think if that's kind of the route you were planning on, those were the values you were planning on, I think that's going to be pretty easy to land on and pretty popular tonight. Any thoughts there, Zach?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you're gonna have to find some ways to again try and get yourself a little bit different. So it's gonna be really interesting to see the way these lineups end up shaking out tonight and who takes these things down. Because yeah, it's gonna be tough. Like again, there's the idea of Peter Porker in the chat saying fading both Austin Matthews and Nate McKinnon. Like that's certainly a route that you can go. Again, you can go with like a Tavares, Nylander, Nyes mini stack or something like that, or just Tavares, Nylander, play some of that other game and try and get away from that mega chalk. I don't know, man. It's going to be fascinating to see what happens here, because it's entirely possible. Like for as decent as the spots are here for Matthews and McKinnon, they could have quiet nights here tonight for sure. Obviously the past in that last game, that 7-4, paint a different picture here. But yeah, I don't know, man. It's going to be fascinating to see. Like, I think it's worth mentioning too that Matthews has had a lot of success against Colorado in his career. 10 goals, 20 points in 15 games played. Nathan McKinnon, 10 goals, 23 points in 21 games played, going up against Toronto as well.
Yeah. So in that game that was 7-4, I think there's definitely reason to get behind fading Nathan McKinnon and Austin Matthews tonight. I mean, if you just take a look back at that game a few weeks ago, like Valeri Nichushkin, 3 goals, 1 assist, 4 points. Ross Colton had 2 assists that night. Charlie Coyle, 1 assist that night. So like some other guys got in the mix. Like sure, Nathan McKinnon undoubtedly had 2 goals, and Austin Matthews had 3 assists, but you also had 2 assists from Tavares, or 2 goals from Tavares, 2 assists from Nylander. So like if you want to go the route and try to still target this game but get different, I think it's fine to build around Toronto 2, maybe Colorado 3, maybe still kind of put Colorado 2 in the mix and hope it works out. I don't love the option, but like, why not just say like, hey, let's just go Ross Colton and Valeri Nichushkin. The value feels fine. They both feel like fine enough plays with Toronto too, and that's just a way to target this game and get completely different. Is it going to work? We'll have to see. But like they're coming in literally with half the amount of ownership. Toronto 2 is seeing half the amount of ownership as Toronto 1, and then Colorado 2 and 3, it's not even close in comparison to Colorado 1. So yeah, like we're obviously spending a lot of time on this game, but this is the game that I think is really going to kind of paint the picture for this evening. Any thoughts on Blackwood's career against the Leafs? You got those numbers in front of you? Because I'll tell you right now, Blackwood is the guy that I'm probably the most interested in tonight in trying to get a little bit different, because he's seen, still 25% of the ownership, but he's the 3rd highest owned goalie on the slate. And with as much chalk is coming in on like Matthews and company, I think I'm going to do a lot of fading Toronto tonight and just hope that these numbers kind of bear themselves out. The offense has been really struggling at 5v5, really tough matchup at 5v5. And if they can just hold that power play to even 2 goals and just limit them completely at 5v5, like I think there's a route to definitely where Blackwood's the optimal goalie tonight. And I think that's kind of my thought process, is fading Toronto and going with Blackwood tonight. But what are the career numbers here?
Yeah, 4 games played, going up against the Colorado Avalanche, 284 goals against average and a 924 save percentage. So he's been really good. Those games have been split evenly between his time with the Devils in 2019-20 and with the San Jose Sharks last year, where he faced the Avalanche twice. So there's definitely a route for him to be really solid here. Oh, wait, sorry. I think I got the wrong numbers. Hold on. Just give me a second here.
I feel like he stood on his head a couple times against Toronto when he was with San Jose, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, sorry. My bad. I looked up the wrong numbers there. I'm feeling a little under the weather, so I'm kind of out of it here today. His numbers against the Leafs in his career are not good, actually. So 5 games played, only 1 win, of 452 goals against average, and an 857 save percentage. So he's actually had some struggles against the Leafs in his career.
Well, when you play with the Sharks, that'll happen. Okay, let's get to game number 2. We've got the Minnesota Wild and Seattle Kraken. Minnesota 3.2 implied total, 2.6 for the Kraken, minus 154 home favorites for Minnesota. A little bit better matchups in this one. Minnesota top line has the second best matchup of the night. Basically the best matchup that we care about, considering the number 1 matchup overall is Seattle 4. So yeah, really good matchups here for the top 9 of the Minnesota Wild. Pretty good matchups for the second and third line of the Seattle Kraken. I mentioned Seattle 2 yesterday as a line that was like grading out tremendously well. Their sample was too small to use. It's basically big enough now where I'm like, I'm just going to throw it in because on a 2-game slate, you need to know about it. And they've been really good. I still have a very difficult time trusting Chandler Stevenson. But Jordan Eberle's played very well since coming back. Eli Tolvanen's been solid. The shot volume's always been good with him. Stevenson, like, lack of shot volume, but we talked about this whole slate kind of lacks shot volume outside of the top dogs. So Seattle 2 super interesting to me tonight. They're not going to see much ownership whatsoever. They're grading out for 8.1%, which is what, like the 10th highest owned line on the slate, and they grade out third best on the charts. So really quite interested in them. Tolvanen 4,400, Stevenson 4,100, and Eberle 4,200. Super easy to get there, super easy to pair with the top lines, and they're not going to see much ownership at all. I'm definitely going to be getting there. The Seattle 1 line, they're much more expensive. I guess not much more expensive. They're actually $300 cheaper, but much higher owned is what I was trying to say. Double the ownership, and their matchup is significantly worse, and their underlying metrics are significantly worse. So I prefer Seattle 2 in this spot. And then Seattle 3, we talked about yesterday, like Jared McCann, still a guy with good shot volume, a guy that can kind of get there. Hasn't had a lot of success as of late, but I think that McCann at $5,100 is a really nice price tag. We got Yanni Newman, who I expressed concerns about him only playing 9 minutes 2 games ago. He ended up playing, I think, 13 minutes last night. Still only had 1 shot on goal, but he's back down to $2,600. Really, really good shot, really good AHL numbers. Power play exposure. I don't mind the Newman and McCann mini stack either if you want to get on the Seattle side of things, which I think is a really interesting side of this game. You take a look at the big board here, their offense has been the second best in this slate at 5v5. Obviously, second half of back-to-back with travel. Minnesota, pretty good defensive team, and Seattle's power play struggling. But, like, we're trying to get different here tonight, and I think Seattle's it's not the worst play ever. Like, sure, we were somewhat interested in Spencer Knight last night, and it went horrendously, and Chicago sucks, but, like, Seattle showed that they can score goals still. They have the dogs that are able to put the puck in the back of the net, and with the ownership that's coming in on Gustafsson, highest on goal in the slate, with the ownership that's coming in on Minnesota, the second line is the third highest owned line on the slate. The top line is the fourth highest owned line on the slate. Like, I think that Seattle is a really interesting pivot option tonight, and a route that I'm certainly going to get to quite a bit. Will it work out? We'll see. But this second line specifically grading out third best is kind of a charts play for me tonight, and I'm just gonna throw them into those deep tournaments, and hopefully it works out. What are your thoughts? Let's go with let's start with Seattle on your side first here.
Yeah, I mean, I got a lot of interest in Seattle here. I think this is kind of the way for anybody building GPP lineups to get themselves really different here. I mean, the ownership coming in on this Minnesota side is just ridiculous to me. I should caveat that by saying, like, it is a 2-game slate, so I'm not surprised to see some weird stuff going on here. But when you look at the metrics offensively for Minnesota, it's dreadful. They have been terrible at 5-on-5. The only way that they're really scoring any goals at all is through the power play. And then you look at the ownership on the Seattle side of things, and it's just significantly lower. 16% for Seattle 1, Seattle 2 at just 8%, Seattle 3 at just 6%. For my GPP builds, I've got a lot of interest in both Seattle 2 and Seattle 3 here. I'm comfortable building around these lines for sure on this slate tonight. Jordan Eberle, again, he's been great since coming back from injury, scoring 2.5 assists per hour of ice time, 3.2 points per hour. Chandler Stevenson finding some offense in his game right now as well. He's also been great against Minnesota in his career, 4 goals and 19 points in 22 games, which is kind of surprising to see. And then Eli Tolvanen. I mean, this guy's kind of the shot volume guy and the goal scorer on that line. 2 goals per hour of ice time over his last 20 games, 8.3 shots on goal. Doesn't have any points against the Minnesota Wild in his career, but let's hope that can change tonight, because I think I'll be having a lot of this Seattle 2 line. And then even the Seattle 3 line, I don't mind getting down there at all either. Burakovsky looks like nobody's playing him at just 1.7%. I think he's a guy that, you can get in there and get your lineup really different. And similar with Jared McCann and Yanni Newman as well. So it seems like an interesting spot here getting to the Seattle side of this game instead of being heavy on that Minnesota end.
Yeah, and I mean, we had Minnesota grade out first last week. It went poorly. Like, we know how bad this Minnesota offense can be. But we also know how good they can be defensively. So Seattle's certainly not a safe play, but on 2-game slate, like, if you're fading Colorado, Toronto, you got to pick a side here in the Seattle game for the most part. And I don't mind getting there. If we take a look at their power plays, like in terms of correlating here, if you want to go with Stevenson and Eberle, They obviously correlate nicely with Brandon Montour on this top power play unit. They see a kind of an even split in terms of 5v5 ice time between Dunn and Montour. And then the top line, you're probably, leaning towards the Vince Dunn route. If you want to play Matty Beniers and company, they see more ice time with Dunn at 5v5. They also correlate a little bit nicer with Schwartz and Kako there on the second power play unit. And then Jared McCann's line, the third line there with Yanni Newman, they correlate, not really with anybody. Riker Evans and Josh Mahura at 5v5 is far from ideal, but probably Vince Dunn or Montour on the power play. You got one of each there, so kind of pick your poison with those two. And I always say Seattle, like if I'm playing Seattle, I'm playing their defensemen. Like they're my favorite plays, right? Like I can get behind McCann one-offs, but like I want to play Dunn, I want to play Montour. Those feel like the best plays from the Seattle side. Minnesota is a lot trickier. The top line here, Nyquist, Rossi, Boldy. So their matchup is the best of the bunch in Minnesota side thing. The offensive metrics are horrific. Absolutely horrific. The second line, seeing 21% ownership. The offensive numbers are absolutely horrific. I just don't see myself being like, yeah, let's do it. Like I'd rather play Philip Grubauer, I think. Like, I just do not trust this team offensively whatsoever. And it's not like, okay, these are new lines and they grade out poorly. Like, they're scoring 0.97 goals for per 60 at 5v5. That's per 60 over the last 10 games. The power play has been good. That's it. So, building around the power play is kind of the only route to go. So, Rossi, Boldy, Hartman, Zuccarello, Faber, I think are all okay. I think my favorite play on the Minnesota side of things is Minnesota 3. Unfortunately, Ryan Hartman is seeing an outrageous amount of ownership, but for good reason. The volume is solid. The floor is good enough. He's on that top power play unit. He's a $4,500 center. But I don't mind a Hartman, Vinny, Hinostroza mini stack. Hinostroza decent shot volume. Bump down to that second power play unit. He's just $3,400, but he's also just 9.9% owned. He's significantly lower owned than the rest of this Minnesota roster. Rossi 18%, Boldy 33%. Johansson 14%, Gaudreau 25%, Zuccarello 20%. Like I'd rather just play the not chalky version of Minnesota or Philip Grubauer, honestly. So one way to get different tonight seems to be just play Philip Grubauer and fade Minnesota. And is that horrifying? Absolutely. But Philip Grubauer, since coming back from the NHL, has stopped 46 of the 49 shots that he's faced. That's a .939 save percentage. We know Minnesota literally cannot score. So he's $7,400. He's the lowest owned goalie of the night. This team doesn't score. Seattle's okay defensively. The penalty kill's been middle of the pack. I'd rather play Grubauer than the Wild, honestly, or I'll play Minnesota's third line.
Yeah, 100%. Even further to that too, like it's not like Minnesota's getting a lot of shots away either. Looking at all situations over the last 10 games played for all four teams on the slate, Colorado has the highest shots for per hour, ranking 6th in the NHL. Then it's Seattle at 10th, Toronto at 22nd, and Minnesota at 31st. The Wild are just taking 23.4 shots on goal per hour of ice time over their last 10 games here. Like it's just been absolutely dismal for this team in terms of trying to generate and score any offense here. So I think for me, like I'm doing 5 lineups tonight. So I'm going to have one of them that's going to be like a Minnesota power play stack. That's going to be it for Minnesota forwards that I play tonight, I think. I've got interest in getting to the blue liners on this Minnesota team. Jake Middleton looks like he's a really solid play. So does Jared Spurgeon. Brock Faber seeing a good chunk of ownership as well. I think I'm comfortable playing the defenseman there a little bit, but man, it just, I agree, man. It just feels really tough for the forward ranks here on Minnesota.
Tom says, after this slander, I think I'm going to have at least 6 Minnesota players. Probably fair. And I still don't think that's outrageous. Like, if you want to build around Minnesota, and you just got to try to get different. Like, they're so chalky. But yeah, Philip Grubauer could just go back to being Philip Grubauer at any moment. Like, so it's not out of the realm of possibility that Minnesota scores a bunch of goals tonight. I just think it's unlikely. So just playing the odds here. I will say, I still like Matt Boldy. I still think Matt Boldy is a great play. He projects really well. Matt Boldy is my favorite play on the Minnesota side of things. I don't mind like a Minnesota Matt Boldy, Brock Faber mini stack, something like that. If I want to play some power play correlation there, like I just full stacking Minnesota with, there's not a lot of shot volume to go around. Like Zuccarello's is improved with the increased ice time. Marcus Johansson doesn't really shoot. So it's just, like you said, they're not getting enough shots off. There's not a lot of floor. There's not a lot of upside. It doesn't seem. So, yeah, I'm kind of uninterested. But yeah, I agree with you. Middleton grades out, three of the top four defensemen are Middleton, Spurgeon, and Faber in terms of value projection tonight. I can get behind that. Vince Dunn's price coming down to $4,600 makes him one of my favorite D plays of the night as well. In terms of super cheap options, I don't mind getting Declan Chisholm either at $3K to see a 4.3% ownership tonight. Some of these Leaf defensemen that are probably going to block a lot of shots tonight. You got Jake McCabe. You also got Chris Tanev at $3,400. I think that they're fine. I mentioned some of these Colorado defensemen as well. Devon Taves is $4,400 is a great price for a guy that's going to play a ton of ice time with Colorado 1. And then if need to get way down there, I don't mind Sam Girard at $2,900. Anybody else that really sticks out to you, Zach, that you were like, let's jam these super cheap defensemen in my lineup?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of interesting names. A guy that's kind of popping off in my charts here is Sam Malinsky. This is a guy seeing like 0.5% ownership tonight. Literally nobody is getting to him. Over his last 20 games played in all situations, 15 minutes a night, 4.5 shots on goal per hour of ice time, 6.7 blocks per hour of ice time. He doesn't see a ton of minutes, but he finds ways to be very, very productive in them. $3,300, legitimately no ownership. 2 games played against the Leafs in his career. He's got 2 assists. So, there's definitely a route where he could get on the scoreboard. I think he's a really interesting option here on this slate tonight. John Merrill, if you're really punting off, that's a guy that can block some shots as well. Ryan Lindgren at $2,800 feels like he could be a decent play here on this slate as well tonight. Yeah,
Malinsky was always a solid play when Josh Manson was out before they added defenseman, and he would go up to 20 minutes. Hell yeah, this is going to be a great value. The ice time has been relatively limited, but he's still, over his last 11 games, he's averaged just north of 1 shot per game and 2 blocked shots. So he can certainly get to that block bonus night. Goalies, we kind of already really covered it, to be honest with you. Gustafson's probably the safest play. He's also the highest owned. He's been great, though. Mackenzie Blackwood's a guy that I want to get behind tonight in a big way, and just hopefully that works out for me. Joseph Woll's probably the goalie that I have the least amount of interest in, and then I'm going to sprinkle in some Grubauer as the lowest owned goalie on the slate. Any differences? I feel like you like Woll a little bit more than I do.
Yeah, I think I like Woll a little bit more than you, again, solely just because of the Maple Leafs bet that I got. So I don't mind getting there tonight on him. But yeah, it's don't be afraid to have a little negative correlation in your lineups here tonight. You got to find some ways to get yourself different from the field. That's definitely one way to do it.
Tom says Montour at 7.8 attempts per game over his last 10. That's above McKinnon, McCarr, only behind Matthews on this slate. Yeah, we haven't projected for 2.8 shots on goal at $5,700. Yeah, I mentioned if I'm playing Seattle, I'm playing at least one of Montour and Vince Dunn. Let's get to today's hat trick pick challenge. If you want to participate in today's hat trick pick challenge, all you got to do is drop your hat trick pick in the comment section of the video on YouTube, not the live chat. And if your player scores a hat trick, we will get you a $25 gift card to nationgear.ca. You can pick up some DFO swag. If somebody scores a hat trick that nobody picks, which seems fairly unlikely on tonight's slate given the size of it, we will get you we will just raffle it off to anybody that submitted a pick. So I won yesterday's head-to-head. I'm gonna go first. I'm gonna say my hat trick pick. Let's go back-to-back hatties against the Leafs, Valeri Nichushkin.
There you go. I love it. Let's go really off the board. Take a former Edmonton Oiler, Jordan Eberle.
There we go. Let's get to today's DFO head-to-head, which, as I mentioned, I took down yesterday. I've got a 4-game lead now, and whatever the price to pay is really coming down to kind of your level of comfort at this point, unless you get out a heater. We still got 30 days left of the season, which is roughly, let's call it 20 more episodes. So a lot of time to make up ground here. We got to figure out what the punishment is. But for my build tonight, I went with McKinnon, Netchas, Nichushkin, and Lehkonen. A big Colorado stack with Blackwood between the pipes. I went with the mini stack of Ryan Hartman and Vinny Hinostroza on that third line. They also pair fairly nicely with Declan Chisholm in terms of a 5v5 correlation there. And then Vince Dunn as my one-off blue liner from the Seattle Kraken, hoping to make it a 5-game lead. Who do you have?
Yeah, my lineup that's going to take me to 36 and 41 on the season. Jammed in Nathan McKinnon and Austin Matthews. Wanted to get some of that Seattle 3 or Seattle 2 in there with Eli Tolvanen and Jordan Eberle. Again, Joseph Woll in the net there. Talked about that a little bit earlier, just a way to get yourself really different. The Minnesota defensemen look like they're solid plays. So Middleton and Spurgeon in there, and then got Ryan Hartman as well. Looks like a solid value play tonight.
What an absolutely riveting 2-game slate we have tonight. Best of luck. Hey, somebody's got to win the money tonight. Might as well be us on this shitty little slate. We will be back tomorrow with an outrageously large 14-game slate. And then we'll probably won't even come live on Friday for that one gamer. So probably our last show of the week tomorrow. If you want to get $20 off your first month of RotoGrinders Premium, you click the link in the description of the video on YouTube. And it doesn't have to be RotoGrinders NHL. It can be any one of their sports. So check out rotogrinders.com. Shout out to them for providing projected ownership for today's show. And if you want to join the DFO DFS Discord, the link is also in the description of the video. Best of luck tonight. Hopefully you return with more money in your bankroll tomorrow than you had tonight. Until tomorrow, we'll say cheers.